peers. That's a way of signaling information between you and your peers, just some information about that route. And that's a really important aspect, and it's a really important advantage of BGP over other routing protocols. And the AS paths as well. You can actually trace the actual ASs that, you know, when you see a prefix arrive at your router, you can actually, in the routing display menu, you can actually show the AS paths, and you can actually trace back which countries and which ASs it actually traversed to get to you. Okay, don't worry about that. It's just a TCP protocol because it's reliable and it allows for this constant stream of updates and withdrawals. So that's how it exchanges the information. So, a couple of things. Just we would recommend that you use full route tables whenever possible, particularly if you're multi-homing. And the simple reason for that is you can actually detect failures upstream. Not only that, but when you do uniclass reverse path forwarding, you can actually verify that you're not getting spoofed traffic, or you can at least identify some of the spoofed traffic. And that's a really key advantage of using full route tables. The cons, of course, of doing that is that you have complexity. You need loads of RAM. So I'm looking forward to the x86 64 version, so we can use even more RAM. So Yanis has promised me that he would do that. Is that right, Yanis? So anyway, basically, can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Cool. So that mightn't be a good thing, I promise. But anyway, the main thing is obviously you have higher CPU usage as well, but you get a lot more control. So with great power comes great responsibility and the like. So, of course, when you're working with full route tables, the first thing I hated about doing it, and I did go about saying, click here to display them all, not such a hot idea. But if you're a patient man and you wait a few minutes, you will see the entire internet in front of you. But it is, so like route filters are your friends. Or sorry, the display filters are your friends. So if you want to look for a particular IP range, you just type it in and hit search and you can get it. So that's what you would typically do if you're trying to diagnose a problem with routes on your own network. It's just type in your own application and then you see all your routes in front of you. So it's reasonably fast as well and responsive to that. This is the main reason why I was saying about the full route tables. The primary reason is that it's really easy to detect a problem with your upstream ISP if it's direct. It's like a cable's gone or a fiber cut. But if there's a problem between your upstream and their upstreams or peers, very hard to detect it. You can't detect it. But if you have a full route table and you have a full peering session with both of them, as they have problems, those routes will be withdrawn from your primary transit provider and you'll simply just fail over to your secondary transit provider. So that's a very nice feature. And it means it's granular failover. So a lot of you, I'm sure, have one fairly cheap or good value bandwidth, and then you've got an expensive one that you hope you don't have to use. So with that, you can, if your upstream provider is having a problem with just one or two small networks like Google, you can just fail over that traffic to your expensive provider. Anyway, so just if you were ever diagnosed with that, like for instance 8.8.8.8 wasn't available, you could do a search and you can see here, I can't ping 8.8.8, but I could ping level 3's DNS servers. So in that case, you can see obviously when I searched for 8.8.0/34, I got nothing. But then when I searched for 4.0.0.9, which is a fairly large network, it has to be said, I was able to find that obviously the prefix is there. So, sorry, moving swiftly on, said all that. The full tables visualization, that's where I was talking about the AS path, remember just earlier? And you can actually trace where you're getting your routes from, which is quite useful. So, denial of service attacks, this is the meaty portion of the presentation, the more challenging one, the scary one. They manifest themselves in various different ways, but for ISPs, you're generally concerned about bandwidth consumption attacks. So they just literally swamp your bandwidth. And once the bandwidth arrives at your port, it's too late. It's been effective. That's what it basically means. There's not much you can actually do on your router. That's the main problem with the denial of service, is you have to think outside of your own ISP. The problem is outside your own ISP. It's not you, it's some other asshole who doesn't like it. Sorry, but that's what they are. I hope none of you are assholes, and I hope you don't. Anyway, moving swiftly on. That's a better way to do it. So, the attacker's objective is to consume all available resources on your network so that legitimate users can't use the internet. That's basically it. And it seems like a bit childish, but it can be an exceptionally effective tool in destroying your business. And it can be done by a competitor. You know, if you lose all your contracts and then they're like, oh, we'll just help your customer base out because you're being attacked by someone. So the types of DNS, or the types of DOS attacks, the distributed denial of service attack is the one that's probably most potent. It's very difficult to identify the source of attack because you're being attacked by a load of people who themselves are generally victims of some sort of cybercrime, as the politicians like to call it. So it's difficult to mitigate, and I'm just going to give you a couple of tips, and I hope that someday you don't have to use them, but if you do, that they'll help you. The most dangerous ones are the reflected amplification attacks, and you're probably part of the problem and you're also part of the solution to that. I don't know how many of you had any issues with open DNS resolvers on your client units recently that you were really, why is all my uplink traffic going? So effectively you're participating or facilitating that attack. By not configuring your units correctly, you're actually decreasing the security of the internet generally. It's difficult to mitigate, and it is pretty catastrophic. I think Spam House had one, and if I'm not mistaken, it was something like 750 gigs of a denial of service attack. So it was pretty insane, and they used NTP. So denial of service attack sources, there's the various different ones. There's infected or compromised systems. So someone downloads a nice screensaver, and then suddenly that screensaver is also, it's a screensaver, but it's also a spam bot, and it's also a denial of service. So generally we call them zombies, but basically they're part of a botnet and they're controlled by some a-hole, and they basically either tell it to sell cheap Viagra or, you know, take out some poor lad's network. So these pose a persistent and serious threat to your network, and an attack can last for 5 minutes. There's often, I think, a lot of gamers tend to do it to knock someone else off the, you know, they see the source IP, they kind of go, God, he's really cowardly, so they actually call it the airstrike, and suddenly that gamer is offline, along with the gamer's network is also offline. Thankfully, they tend to last only 5 minutes. Misconfigured CPs and ISPs, this is the big one, and this is the one that you guys yourselves could actually deal with. Misconfigured internet-facing servers or services, and ISPs are doing to implement BCP 38. So BCP 38, for those who don't know, BCP best current practice. It's kind of like an RFC. And it basically what it says, I'll tell you later. I'm just going to move on back onto this slide here. So just suspense there, you know. Anyway, so I have to say one thing, you're a great crowd. You actually laugh at my jokes, because I was in Croatia and this guy came up to me afterwards, like, everyone was talking during the presentation, no one was listening. And then I crack a joke and be silent. And I was like, could you not even just talk over the jokes as well? But no, be silent. So then afterwards he came up and he goes, oh, sorry that we didn't laugh at your jokes, it's the cultural thing. And I went, well, neither did you. You know? So anyway, no one laughed. Anyway, so basically, any device that responds to UDP with a larger message than the requester made can facilitate an amplification attack. And there's MikroTik CPs, unfortunately, are no exception because they follow standards, so they are just as susceptible to these, are just as culpable if misconfigured as any other device on the internet. Main one, DNS. You're probably seeing a lot. If you actually just do a log rule, it's very interesting. How many people on the internet think your clients are all valid DNS servers? And just do it as an experiment, just put a log, but make sure you have enough RAM, because yeah, it's not good otherwise. But the key thing is DNS, NTP with the NTP package enabled, and SNMP is another one which can cause hassle. So DDoS using misconfigured servers. Again, if you have a server that was an open resolver, as they call, responded to HTTP requests, SNMP requests on the internet, which you shouldn't, then it could be a potential vector for someone else's attack. Attackers love using DNS, HTTP, and SNMP for electric collection attacks. So why? Because UDP is stateless and you can't verify the client's location. So you're literally, I can say, I'm going to attack you from 8.8.8. There's a program called Scapy, and it's kind of like, you remember those mortgage brokers that did the subprime? You can fill it out with whatever you want and send it in, and the internet will accept it and route it to the victim without any question. So that's the key problem there. So DNS, if you send a small message to these servers, they can respond with a much larger one, and that's the problem. MX records will be one, DNS extensions as well, there's a number of ones. Get bulk request or query the route table on a BGP route with a full table will be quite a large response for a very small request. Then again, what is a full routed BGP router listening on SNMP public for in the first place? So, geez, I hope I haven't done that. Anyway, don't check, please. So, NTP, so query the list of clients that have queried the servers, and that was the latest one that was used against Spamhaus by the very same guys who Spamhaus are blocking on a daily basis. So, what can you do? Well, you can filter using the input chain of all inbound traffic on your public-facing router. That's your CPEs or any public-facing router, your input traffic to that. Just block any new UDP connections. So that won't stop it resolving DNS requests for itself, but it will actually at least cut down the attack surface of your device. Disable any service and prevent it from listening on the public interface. So what could MikroTik do to help? I think they could possibly do something like a CPE mode, where the interface, if you learn a default route on an interface, then you would automatically, you wouldn't bind the DNS service or the NTP or the SNMP to that interface. That causes a problem because then you can't monitor SNMP on your clients. So possibly another option, which is the third one, which I like, which I came up with myself, root, which is basically where I said if you had a DHCP server for a client, that you tied the two together, and that when you actually set up a DHCP server and you say, oh, I'm listening on Ether1, then it would bind to the Ether1 address and not onto the public WAN address. So there's various different things that could actually help by default, so but ultimately I suppose the responsibility is yourself, but I think just a couple of tweaks would actually help improve the security of the platform. Allow firewall classification on interface groups. So I've often asked this of Yanis, and he keeps refusing me, so I'm going to have to buy him a bigger bottle of whiskey or something. But I'm convinced that Yanis is the boss of MikroTik. He's the hidden boss of MikroTik. Because I think if he goes to a little weedy developer, and he goes, I need this feature, the weedy developer looks at him and goes, you won't beat me up, will you? So I think that's okay. So I think that's like if Yanis asked me to do something, now I'm kind of nearly as big as him, not quite, but I kind of think, if he asks me to do something, I'll give it serious consideration. That's all I'm going to say. Now, what can ISPs do to help? BCP 38, again, back to the best current practice. And what it is that you check all the traffic exiting your network, and you check it against the following rules. And you just simply say, is the source IP part of my allocation? Simple question. Is it part of my transit client's network? And is it an IP of one of my peers? And if the answer is yes to all of them, then or any one of them, you pass the traffic. If it's not, you log it. And thankfully, one of Yanis did a very cool thing here, where in version 6.19 you can actually log and drop at the same time. And so you can put in your log prefix, I love Yanis, thank you. And you can put something else like maybe that you're implementing BCP 38 on it. So what else can you do on that? Well, it's just trying to see. Yeah, so and also this gives you an idea that if you're an enterprise that's an early warning system, that one of your devices has been compromised, and then you need to take corrective action. So if we took BGP 38 a bit more seriously, then the spoof traffic in an attack would be actually significantly reduced. So if every ISP did it, amplification attacks would not be nearly as effective as they currently are. So it's something that if you're not doing, even though it's a pain in the ass, I know, it's worth doing so that you're not a pain in the ass for someone else. And hopefully they'll pay it forward and eventually we'll all be secure. And you won't have to do all the rest of the stuff you have to do in my slides. So what are the symptoms of a DDoS? Well, at first it looks like a possible routing issue. You look in and route tables seem fine. But then you look at your traffic graphs and you're kind of going, okay, my links are fully utilized inbound, lots of UDP traffic to one or more addresses on your network. If it's a single address on your network, it's actually relatively easy to tame. And we'll talk about that. If it's all the addresses on your network, then someone really doesn't like you. And sorry, we'll talk about that in more detail in a few minutes. Your link will flatline and saturate at full capacity, and your provider's network graphing systems will show an even bigger spike. So if you have a gigabit Ethernet interface and it's full, chances are your transit provider across their backbone are probably seeing something of the order of 5, 10, 15, 20 gigs. And if you're spam house, it'll be 750 gigs. I don't know what a 750 gig router looks like, but I would like one. So I believe that will be released by MikroTik in Q4 of next year. No pressure, guys. So I'll help you test it out. How do I protect my network? Do your best and hope your best will prevail over the adversary. Plan for the eventuality and work out what you can and can't do. Work out your capabilities that your network hardware has. You know, there's no point in having something with gigabit interfaces at the core of your network if it can't push gigabit, you know, that type of stuff. Look at what your links can handle and then prepare a response plan. And literally, it can be very simple. Currently, like if you get hit today, you can ring your upstream provider, try and identify who's the target of the attack. Ring them and say, can you black hole this? It's a very simple call. You know, and basically, when you're on hold and they're going, your call is very important to us, you're kind of going, it's very important to me too. But if you do that, it'll really help. What else can I say? Where was I? Oh yeah, and find out what you can and can't do with change control. So if you're in a much bigger organization, you have change control meetings. Obviously, admin black hole routes here, there, and everywhere mightn't be considered. But you may have a situation where you go to fix and fail, you know, in an emergency situation. So, what else? And identify your weak points in your system and work out a way of mitigating them. So we're going to go into more technical detail, and don't worry. So, what if I'm attacked? Well, you implement the plan. You identify the target of the attack. Where's the attack heading towards? Simple. Work with all the interested parties. If the attack is a victim, like a corporation or something like that, and they've said something bad about Anonymous or something like that, then you have to talk to them. And the very simple thing is kind of move them. And I mean, I think so if their, let's say IP is 1.1.1.1, you kind of go, maybe you should consider moving to 1.1.1.10. We can help you out there and update your DNS records. If they say no, you're kind of in that awkward position where you're just going to have to black them all anyway, so that all the rest of your customers will be happy. Not that you want to do that, but you know, there's no point in all your customers being pissed off at you when just one. So that's not my official policy, but it's kind of one of those things. Is sometimes you gotta seal the hatch and do what you have to do. So inform them, tell them the nature of the problem. They'll understand and say that you're working to mitigate and all that. And you can get them to change their public IP range. That's a very simple one. And prepare to migrate them to a new range. So if you help them out, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, according to Mary Poppins. And she was a mine of knowledge, that lady. And then what else? Prepare an IP migration in a manner that makes it simple for the client as possible. Torch and NetFlow. So Torch is kind of a poor man's NetFlow, and NetFlow is a rich man's Torch. So if you can set up a NetFlow server and analysis box, that can give you a good idea of what's happening on your network. But if you're really stuck and you're not prepared, Torch. And I have been stuck and not prepared, and Torch works quite effectively. So work with your transit providers. So your transit providers, if they're worth their salt, will have a remote triggered black hole service. And a friend of mine from Dublin called Justin, I won't say a second name, But we had a problem where a customer of ours didn't have, he had a peer that he had two peers, one supported black hole routing and the other one didn't. And he said, well, the simple solution to that is turn off your advertisements to the guy who supports it and just let the other guy take all the attack, and maybe they'll change their minds. We don't suggest that, we just say try and reason them and try and move it across. But that's one of the things you can actually do is literally talk to providers and ask them to stop routing some traffic to you. I mean, you can do napalm and just stop advertising your prefixes out. But if it's just one prefix or a handful of prefixes on your network being hit, then it's much easier to still advertise your network out to that ISP, and then just say, well, don't send me traffic to these IPs. And believe it or not, if the thing about the black hole, remote trigger black hole routing, is that it actually benefits your transit provider. It saves them bandwidth on their core links. So the better they are, the more likely they are to support that, and they're supported for free. You know what I mean? Because it's a very important service to have. So what are black hole routes? So this is one of the slides I rehashed from 2 years ago, because Yanis did ask me, well, how many slides is it going to reuse? I believe in recycling. So basically what we do here is we say, you're routing to a black hole and you want to discard the packet. That's basically what you're saying. So if you do a black hole route, it's effectively a route that goes nowhere, okay? And that's what it looks like. And the other thing is, what's really nice about it is, instead of doing just a simple forward drop route, which goes through two processes of the router, you actually do it in the first process in the routing decision. So that's an obvious benefit as well. So you're all familiar with adding routes into MikroTik routers, and generally you'd be adding unicast routes, but you can also advertise a black hole, or you can add a black hole route, and that's effectively saying, I want to discard that traffic, okay? So, once that step is completed, you'll actually see a reduction in traffic to your network. So once your provider actually black holes traffic destined to the attacked IP, it'll reduce the traffic to your network. So, is there a way of implementing a faster response for DDoS, not holding on the line, talking to some network operator? And the answer is yes, there is. And basically it's called remote trigger black holes. And it's where you actually use BGP with a certain community string, and you say, hey guys, actually I want you to black hole this now. And you can do it any time of the day or night. Once the session is up, you can start advertising your own prefixes, so your own IPs. So guys, when we're actually receiving routes from you on a black hole route server, they will only hopefully accept routes from your network as opposed to people, right? Because you could actually create a denial of service condition for other networks as well. You have maximum control over the process. You have no implementation lag, so if the IPs change, you can change it straight away and bring the other IPs back online. So the internet. So here's a map of the internet, which is grossly simplified, so apologies for that. But what we see here is you've got some green links that are 100 gig links that I'm insanely jealous of. Then you got some 40 gig links, and then you got some 10 gig links. And then for the mere mortals like me, we've got our 1 gig link to the internet. And basically, that's kind of roughly how it looks, okay? So you've got all your various different carriers, and they have links between them. So then enter the zombie armies and botnets, and as you can see, I'm not so good at drawing diagrams, so apologies for that. But so these guys are there, they're out on the internet all the time, and suddenly you annoy someone, and they say, well, let's turn the attack on you. So effectively those guys start generating loads of crappy traffic, and it eventually starts flooding all these providers' network, and eventually converges on your links and saturates them. Your response is to simply advertise to your upstream peer. So in this case, I'm the victim. I'm advertising to Travel, and I'm advertising to Hurricane Electric. And pretty much what I'm saying is, I'd rather you didn't send me this traffic. And that, so the problem is you can only handle a gig on those links. So your providers have much bigger capacity to deal with these problems. So by asking them to drop it on your behalf, they're dropping the traffic on 10 gig or 100 gig links, and it's before the traffic hits your links. And so it makes a massive, it actually stops the traffic when you need it to be stopped, as opposed to when it has arrived at your router and it's too late. So as they will continue to advertise, and if the attack is sufficiently bad, they'll probably pass on the information to their peers in transit and effectively kill off the attack. So, reducing the incoming traffic. Well, if you were being hit like across your whole prefix range, you want to allow traffic to enter for your customers, but you need to block everything else. So if you look at the typical ISP scenario, you've got your internet, your peer networks, you've got your core infrastructure, your DNS servers, radius, all that type of stuff, and maybe some websites. And then you have your backhaul subnets or transmission subnets, and then you have your custom access networks. So if we look at that and we say, well, what actually needs, like if we had to choose which lights do we leave on the last, when the battery is left, we'd say that the customer access networks are obviously ones. So customer IPs are definitely ones that we obviously have to do because we're an internet provider after all. Some core infrastructure IPs. Yeah, so like if you serve DNS requests or you serve some proxying or VPN service for clients, you have to keep them, you have to keep the lights on then. But pretty much everything else is fair game to actually be backhauled. So your backhaul subnets between routers, management IPs if you have public IPs on them, unallocated IPs and unused IPs. So if you have an allocated IPs, basically backhaul the range, whatever's left over. And that is quite an effective tool. So if IPs don't need to be internet accessible, can we simply blackhaul them? Can't argue with that logic. And so I'm going to talk about just a sample, just a small one, /30 network. You have some business, you're providing a link. So you have MikroTik client unit plugged into their firewall, okay? So if we look at that, we kind of say, well, what could we black hole in that subnet? So we've got 4 IPs there, from 0 to 3. So what needs to be routable? The client's IP needs to be routable, okay? But what else can we obviously black hole? Well, we can black hole the network address, and we can black hole the subnet mask address. So we just say, for instance, 192.168.0.0/32, that can be black holed. And 192.168.0.3/32 can be black holed. Can we lock this down further? I think so, and the reason I think it is that I don't really care if the internet can contact. In fact, I probably don't want it to happen anyway. I don't want the interface that's facing my client, the routable interface that's facing my client, being accessible on the internet. So I can black hole that. I won't lose sleep if they can't ping it. No one cares. And so, by doing that simple step, we can actually reduce our attack surface in that subnet by 75%, which is impressive enough. And what you're starting to do now is instead of the statistics being all against you, you're starting to turn them around a bit. And you're using the rules to try and favor yourself. And if you do that, you black hole all 3 of those IPs, the customer's internet connectivity will still be as it was, hopefully improved because of the lack of traffic hitting his range. There's a downside to that, and trace routes from outside your network may have gaps in it, who cares? I'm not, it's worth it, I think, so that's what I think. And it will increase the size of your routing tables. So buy bigger routers, bitches. That's my suggestion. And what I would also say is, CCR says 16 gigs of RAM, not a problem, and 64-bit RouterOS on x86 won't be a problem. Won't it, Janice? So let's take that analysis a bit further, right? Let's look at /29. So if we look at /29, I'm glad you asked. And well, you got your 8 IPs again. So let's apply the same logic as before. You block your current gateway, your gateway, the network address, and the broadcast address. So 3 of 8 of IPs have been black holed. That's a 37.5% reduction in attack surface. I think the maths are okay. So is there any more improvements we can do? Possibly. So let's look at it. How many IPs are actually active on the client side? So that's the other thing. And this is kind of much more manual. This is where you're getting really desperate to try and reduce the traffic. But here's the thing, you can reduce the traffic. That's the good news. The bad news is someone has to go through all these /29s and find out what's up and not. So if you had 3 used IPs, let's say VRRP and a load balancer or something like that, so you have 2 real IPs, you have a virtual IP flowing between them, then they'd have 3 IPs on their side. So you can black hole another 2 IPs. So now you're at 5 of 8 IPs being black holed. So you can reduce your traffic by around 62.5%. And then if we go to 2 used IPs, well then you're up back up to around the 75% happy figure. And if the client was lazy, just asked you for 1 IP, or asked you for a /29 but are only using 1 IP because they just wanted the others just in case, then you can actually get an 87.5% reduction in attack surface. So if my entire network is under attack, so if someone really doesn't like you, you can reduce the traffic inbound to your network according to this massively complicated formula, which is where you divide the number of black hole routes by the number of IPs that you're advertising, the number of IPs in the prefixes that you're advertising in BGP. And the higher that ratio is, the better. So what can you do? You can start planning your defense, map out your network in IP plan, use the standard, like for instance those /32s, keep the standard and say the first IP of the subnet or the last IP of the subnet will be my router and the customer's default gateway. Did you get me? Does everyone get that? I'm not boring you? Don't answer that if the answer is yes. Okay, that's good. What else? Reserve an allocation of IPs for transmission and blackhole subnets. Why is that? Well, you could block a supernet. You know, so if you had a load of /30s or point-to-point links taken from a /24 and just black hole that entire /24, or maybe do it as 2 /25s. I'll explain that later. And if things get really scary, that's where you this is like where you are desperate to try and reduce it. And the reason why I'm saying this is that you're trying to get it that the bandwidth coming into your network is less than the capacity of your network. Then you want a packet loss. That's really what you have to do. So if you have 100 gigs, your target is to basically only to black hole 90% of your IP. You know, if you have 100 gigs and you have a 10 gig link, your target is to black hole 90% of your prefixes. That's not always going to be possible, and there's different options after that. We can talk about that again. Maybe at the European one. But so you can reduce exposed IPs by 90%. Then you can actually reduce the traffic being hitting your network by 90%. Filtered based on source. It's only available on internal networks. You can't. So this is something you might do, like where you see a persistent threat. You could actually block them. And the way you do that is by turning on unicast reverse path verification, which in fairness, Yanis campaigned for me, and he did that. He was pretty legendary. So basically what that was is this kernel setting. It was available in Linux since, I don't know, the year dot. And it allows you to actually check an incoming traffic coming in on an interface. It'll actually just do a quick check and say, do I have a valid route going out that way to that prefix? So it's kind of an anti-spoofing measure. You can use that within your own network on a separate black hole routing service to actually protect your network from threats from the outside. You can explain what you're seeing and they'll help as well. So the main thing is spoofed UDP traffic you can't do anything about it. That's why when you're actually advertising black hole routes to your upstream providers, they're only going to accept IPs from your network and not 8.8.8.8. Simple as that. They'll kind of go, we can't black hole that. Right, sorry. So turning on a URPF is very easy. You go to IP settings and you turn it on and you select strict or loose mode. Generally with full route tables you probably use loose, it's fine. Strict is obviously much harder because much stricter in that even if the route is viable that direction, if there's a better route somewhere else, it'll actually drop the traffic. So providers have to be really careful of that one. The reason for that is because only one route is actually active. It's not because of multipath or anything like that. It's just that there's only one route that's active for that particular prefix in the table. URPF, route packets, okay, I've said all that. So automatic route, remote trigger black hole routes, automatically accept black hole announcements with appropriate communities from your customer if they only announce prefixes from within their own IP assignments. That's the first thing. So you set up a filtering, and let's say Mike is advertising a prefix to me, and he's Google. He's the new Google, so he's 8.8.8.8.0/24. Then he can black hole 8.8.8 to me, and I'll accept it because it's his prefix. But if he advertises 7.7.7.7/32, then I'm probably going to say, no, Mike, you can't really do that for you. So it's only, you can only, as a transit provider, accept black hole prefixes from someone's network. It only makes sense in that case. Limit the number of prefixes they can announce so that they don't do a denial of service on your memory and say, I have a billion routes to black hole and a failure RAM. Again, when the 64-bit x86 operating system comes out, we'll be all good. Trust is based on the fact that they can only block their own IPs. That's the key thing there. You can only block, you're basically saying, I'm opting out of getting internet to this IP, so it's their choice. Preventing collateral damage. So the key point of all this is that if you have to block a customer that's getting hit hard, and they're saying they don't want to change IP, then you're kind of between a rock and another rock, or a rock and a hard place. And the only thing I'd say is that you just black hole them. Because they're already a victim, there's no point in having every other client being a victim. And I'm saying that, I said it jokingly earlier, but it may be a serious question you have, particularly with an awkward, non-technical client. That's what you're up against, that's what you're up against. Contact them, give them an alternate IP, advertise your black hole route to your upstream, if you own the IP under attack. Providers are only, usually decent providers are only too happy to block it. So if you wanted to black hole, if you wanted to set up a black hole root server, how hard is it? Well, it's basically like setting up a BGP router, standard BGP router. So you go routing BGP networks, and you literally add in the network layer, /32 up to /25. The reason why I say that you should keep it below that is that most providers won't accept on their normal routing table, like not black hole routes, they will only accept prefixes shorter than /24. So they'll only go from, if you're an ISP, transit ISP, you should only really be accepting routes between 8 bits long and 24 bits long. And anything longer than that, you just discard. So in that case, if you keep your black hole routes in the /25 range and smaller, then what that will actually mean is that you're avoiding a possibility of your black hole routes actually leaking into your route table or vice versa. What else can I say? So how are we doing for time? Good. So basically, set up your own black hole route server, an IBGP route reflector. Set up 2 of them if you want. Configure your own black hole route servers and core routers to do black hole filtering based on source and destination. Do set up peering with downstream providers, black hole route servers, so that you can actually advertise to them black hole routes, and do accept from their black hole route servers their prefixes from them. You can limit it to only /32s, or if someone's getting really hammered, you probably will have to relax that from 32 to 25. Okay? And do filtering sessions, do peering sessions with third parties, their prefixes only, so do that. What else? If there's more reading, and basically from INEX, there was actually a very good white paper on it. And there's a very good Cisco white paper on unicast reverse path forwarding and remote trigger black hole routes. Thank you for your attention and patience, and laughing at my jokes, appreciate it. Any questions? Okay.
I think you have one over here.
Normus used to do all the running. Okay, there's one I saw first, and then I'll hit you, okay? Sorry.
So you mentioned NetFlow earlier.
Yeah.
And one possibility with NetFlow is looking at AS that traffic is coming from.
Yeah.
Except for with MikroTik. It looks like you have a good in with those guys. So maybe you can pass that along.
say that again, so it's that you can't see the AS path?
Passing AS path information in with NetFlow from MikroTik.
Cool. That's actually a very good idea. Yeah, no, it's actually cool. Thanks. Cool. Mike. Don't worry, lads, don't bite.
What is the smallest router that's feasible as a BGP router? Can't use a 112.
112. You can if you use default routes only, but you couldn't really do much in terms of huge amounts of prefixes, black holes. But I mean, I think any of the power PC based ones, like so your 1200, your 1100, the beautiful RB1000, which was once my favorite. That one, because you can put about 2 gigs of RAM or 1.5 gigs of RAM supported, it's actually pretty good, yeah. Who else? Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yes. Let's see. At least 2 things. One is RPKI. Is that in the future of MikroTik?
Yeah, RPKI. It is, but I mean, it's not really there's not that many people using it. I don't use it myself now. I should, but I think RPSL seems to be a chore for a lot of people. Root policy specification language. So the RPKI, more secure descriptions. Yeah, I don't see it. What I'd like to see is IRRT toolset support for MikroTik. So the IRR toolset is basically you have your root. I'll soon say it, routing databases. And what you'll actually do is query the likes of Wright and Aaron's databases, and you can actually then automatically build route filters and deploy them to your routers. Currently, they support the more syntax for the bigger brands in, let's say, BGP routing. So I would like to see that. Would probably be a good thing. It would be a good start. I think that'd probably be more urgent than the RPKI for now. But I see where you're coming from. It'll be better.
Okay. And the other thing is, in my network, I just blocked DNS completely at the core routers.
Yeah.
So that.
To stop.
Yeah, because I mean, I can protect my equipment, but I mean, the guys my customers, they're gonna have open DNS servers for sure. I cannot tell them not to. So I just block them.
Yeah, no, I mean that's being honest, that's a reasonably sensible approach. The only problem is your help desk then have to be aware of that, so that when someone goes, I was trying to set up a DNS server and it's not working.
Yeah.
No,
It happens.
But yeah, I would agree with you. In fact, as an emergency response, because one of my friends, he has an ISP down in the middle of the country, and effectively he got hit pretty hard with DNS denial of service. And I've often made the mistake myself. You take the 750 out of the box, you're in a rush, and you just lash on it. The DHCP client, you set up the DHCP server, you put remote requests, and suddenly you're like, why is all my uplink traffic being used? So I think it's quite a common mistake to make, particularly. And now, in fairness, I shouldn't have done that. But sometimes what needs most. So I'd agree that, your textbook response, if you have a problem with your client's configuration, is do exactly what you did, rather than trying to go around to thousands of clients and change their config. So I would agree with you on that.
No, actually, it's just like 5 clients that actually do have working DNS servers.
Exactly.
And then, okay, I'm going to whitelist these 5 guys. The other 1,000 IP addresses, no,
It's certainly a more secure approach, definitely. Thanks very much.
Just a note to answer your first question.
Yes.
We're thinking about many things, but you need to write to us to actually know that it's more important than other things that we're thinking of. And the second thing, default configuration of all router boards come with the blocked DNS from outside and other stuff, so you are secure out of the box.
I just need the default configuration every time.
Sometimes.
Two questions for you, Tom. One, BGP session passwords, what are your thoughts on those? And second question, you were talking about black holing /29, certain IPs, how do you deal with summarization on that?
Yeah, well, you could, if there were the first 4 IPs, you're blocking on a /29, it's quite easy, it's a /30. Being honest, you're probably safest approach is probably just /inish a lot of /32s. With bigger routers, it's not such a big problem. Certainly it'll run into thousands of prefixes on a reasonably sized, but a couple of thousand prefixes in a black hole root server is not much, particularly with the amount of RAM available in the routers. So summarization is okay, but it gets tricky, particularly if clients start saying, oh, I'll skip an IP and I'll use 3 IPs up, because they plan on deploying a router or a server. So for me, I think you could even go as far as saying what would be kind of a cool product is if you actually had routers that would listen on every OSPF area and actually integrate with that, where it would automatically identify the broadcast and network addresses. And then if you have a standard saying the first IP is your router, so it could create those, out of a /30, it would actually create 3 black hole routes automatically. So that would be kind of a cool product. Slightly dangerous, but cool. Double-edged sword.
And what are your thoughts on BGP session passwords?
BGP session passwords. On a locally connected LAN, some people are I prefer them naturally, they're better. On multi-hop one, it's important, I think. So if you're traversing someone else's network, I do think it's important. The only thing is, there are standards out there where they're trying to do, not MD5, but they're trying to actually make the session passwords almost like, I remember being at a 9X talk and Nick Hillard was talking about, they're going to make it almost as complicated as IPsec, which I think is just ridiculous. You'll be able to select the encryption algorithms for the password, and you're just like, Jesus, just encrypt it, please. So unfortunately, it's kind of going, security gone mad almost. But if you are worried about the integrity of routes between you and a root server, you can always use an IPsec peer, which, in fairness, I remember asking Yanis a question like that years ago, and he kind of suggested that just if you're really worried about the authenticity of routes, set up an IPsec peer. I haven't known any provider who's requested that of me or asked me, oh, I want to set up an IPsec peer for sending routes, but it is possible, and it's possible with MikroTik, of course. So passwords are positive, definitely on multi-hop stuff. On locally connected stuff, it's not such a big deal. It's handy on one of the things that I raised in the Internet Exchange back home in Dublin was that we're saying it's handy to prevent accidental misconfiguration of a peer. So if you get the IP wrong and you try to establish a session, so it can be quite useful in that case. Does anyone else, is that okay? Thanks very much, Justin. Bye now. Anyone else? This guy at the back there.
Just one, you talked a lot about blocking, like 75% or /30. Isn't it around the time that you're putting all these entries in when you start wondering why you put public IPs on your network anyway, why you didn't just do it on private IPs and use /32 to the customer?
It's a very good question, and yeah, it's flipping the argument on its head. It's fine. The only problem is when you're actually with the customers. You're then trying to support the customer. So let's say you use a 10 address facing them. You say, okay, now put your public IP on the loopback and I'll set up a static route. And a lot of people will kind of go, that's an alien concept. You're absolutely 100% correct. Yes, you could black hole the entire, or use private IPs and they would be inherently black holed, and then have /32 routes targeting each customer.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But Pppoe would be no argument not to just stick with that.
Yeah.
If you're going to end up lodging all those IPs.
Absolutely, and the converse thing that I did mention actually with the Pppoe is that one of the things is if you have, let's say, a /21 and they're all Pppoe addresses and they're all used, then most of my presentation won't really help you that much. But if you actually have a significant, so I'm kind of rubbish to my own, but the main thing is, and it's something that's subtly done in any of the BGP training courses I've seen, where they say, advertise your subnet on your core routers have an unreachable route for your entire network, because you'll have more specific routes, so that you'll inherently black hole or large chunks of unallocated IPs in your network. But it is, look, it's fair comments, and it was something that crossed my mind, would I put it in or not, so thanks very much. Top drawer. Anyone else? Go on. Oh, there is one guy.
Speaking of that, is there an easy way, if it's not in your routing table, like if we have an IP, it's not in the /32, using Pppoe, is there an easy way to automatically send that to your black hole?
If you put in,
In other words, if the IP is not, if we're not using it, can we black hole it?
you can, if you have an unreachable route. So let's say you have a /24 on a Pppoe concentrator. You can put that on the loopback and advertise that. You can set that as an unreachable. So it's a black hole route on that router, okay? You could advertise that up to the root server, right? You better have the /32s or longer prefixes then being advertised to your clients. There's an inherent problem with that though, in that if you do that, you know the way in PPP, if you have wireless clients in high interference areas using Pppoe, you'll have a lot of flapping routes, and so you'll have a lot, if you're using OSPF in that case, you're going to have a lot of LSA updates, and then you're going to have a lot of recalculations. So for me, you're probably better off, you're kind of trying to summarize routes, and then you're trying to, you know, it's a different problem, basically, with what I'm saying. So you can advertise it automatically, but then you have to advertise the specific client routes, and that can be a problem.
I guess a workaround might be just to read what possibly could be assigned out of your radius server, and if it's there, even if it's not live, we allow it to be announced, even if it hits our network and dies, but the rest doesn't.
Well,
I wonder if
absolutely.
there's an easy way to do that.
There's not an easy way, but you could actually, that's a good idea, you could, like, theoretically take all the current allocated live IPs from your radius server and make sure that they're, and withdraw them individually from a black hole root server. So there's a number of ways to skin in the cat, but it all involves the cat. So, but yeah, but I agree with you. Like, is there anyone else that has a question? All right, that's a hope.
Just one thing, you were filtering IPv4, this like destination on the route table, but that's not doable on IPv6. Right?
No, IPv6 is a bigger problem, much bigger. So like the press station is generally fixed on IPv4, you're right. IPv6, I mean you can do the whole / whatever, is it 48 or 56, or what's the one you allocate to the clients?
64.
64, thank you. So you could possibly do that, but which is a lot of IP still. So we could black hole them, but I don't think denial of service attack is such a big issue in them, or demand for IPv6. It's get there, but my presentation doesn't address it. It's a good question. Okay, I'm actually holding up the show here, so thanks. You can catch me at the bar, buy me a pint, so I'll answer any question you have. Thanks very much.